Okay, hey everyone. This is ACDE 194. There's the agenda in the chat, and yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first up, we have Pectra, and we wanted to touch on DevNet 2 and then on to DevNet 3. Would someone here be able to give an update on DevNet 2? I think things have generally been going well, and yeah.
Yeah, in general, things are stable. We've updated a few images. I think there was an Aragon block production issue that's now been fixed. But besides that, things have been relatively stable and we haven't broke much. Most of the time has been spent on preparing for DevNet 3.
Cool, thanks. Okay, and then yeah, okay, I have an echo. Does anyone else hear this?
Not me.
Okay. Maybe I'll try this. Sorry. Maybe yeah. Anyway, so I know for DevNet 3, we wanted to touch on 7702. Do we have any updates there? I think there were like some last minute spec things to address.
Yeah, what I wrote on the agenda, we recently figured out that our implementation was using multiple cores for the MSM and for BLS 12381, which means that the current gas costs are too high for us, and we would like to increase them a bit, at least for the G1 multi-exponentiation. Yeah, the G2 looks fine to us because we baked in such a margin of error. But the G1, now that we realized that we were using the library in a multi-core way, or well, the library internally was using multiple cores, which it didn't really advertise. But yeah, we would like to run some more benchmarks and increase the gas cost of G1 multi-exponentiation.
Okay. This is something you want to put in DevNet 3?
Ideally, yeah. Depends on when DevNet 3 is happening.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you cut out, but I was asking about 7702. But it sounds like we're generally ready to go. In terms of the spec, are there any implementation points to touch on right now?
I think we still need a execution spec release just so we can add the version. And besides that, also just wanted to surface one other point Barnabas brought up. There is a Teku Aragon issue that's still live on DevNet 2. I'm not sure if either teams want to talk about that / fix it separately. And if that's a blocker for DevNet 3. Do we
Sorry,
have
what's the
any?
blocker? Yeah.
So there's a Teku Aragon issue that Barnabas also mentioned in chat. I forgot to bring up earlier. I wanted to see if anyone from either teams wanted to talk about it or if we deal with it on Discord. And separately, I think we were waiting on an execution spec test release as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, regarding the execution spec tests, we are ready with the tests for 7702. But the problem is that we need the transition tool. So that means that we need at least one implementation from the clients to fill the tests. That's the only thing that we're waiting on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it sounds like from the chat, they'll just take that to Discord. I'm trying to fix the sound on the YouTube stream, so apologies. But I don't know how to do that. So anyway, we'll just keep going. Right. Okay. So otherwise, yeah, it sounds like we're in a pretty good place for DevNet 3. We'll get execution specs release, and yeah, otherwise, do we want to talk about timing?
Yeah, I think timing just depends on readiness. So the clients already have the 7702 changes implemented. The CL teams already have the new spec release implemented. And yeah, depending on that, I guess we can talk about scheduling.
Okay. So do we feel good saying like 2 weeks from now? Is that enough time? We have one comment in the chat. 7702 is not implemented yet. Okay. So yeah, maybe we'll just need to wait for that unless we do want to try to set a date today. Is 2 weeks enough time for people to implement 7702?
Wouldn't it make more sense to push for EOF then before we do 7702? If EOF is already implemented, then we can probably include that in DevNet 3 and then swap it around with 7702 for DevNet 4. If 7702 still requires implementation time and assuming that EOF is ready to be tested already.
So EOF, the issue we would need to have people integrated with the prog network. I'm not sure that all the implementations have merged their EOF against their prog. A lot of them are still doing it against Cancun. So that would be something that would take a little bit of time of moving EOF into DevNet 3. Because last week on the EOF call, we had some, I think it was Perry, someone from the DevOps team. The plan we went with was to do it after 702, so there's only one major change. I have seen it work with an asserter on Kurtosis. So there is I've seen that work. That was my big hang up there. But I'm just concerned about getting it in 2 weeks. We probably could, but I would want to get feedback from the other EOF devs before we change the order.
Yeah, I think we keep things as planned. And then yeah, I feel like I've heard 7702 is straightforward enough to implement. That yeah, I think we'll just wait for that. Do we want to wait then? I guess yeah, either the next CL call or the next EL call to check in there.
I mean, why don't we just plan on launching in 2 weeks from now?
That works for me.
Is anybody against that?
Okay, we got a thumbs up and other comments. I think if a client needs a little more time, I think we can still launch, everyone else 2 weeks and go from there. Yeah, sorry, I'm working on the sound with the stream and it might just not happen today. Okay. So right. Anything else on DevNet 2 or 3?
I'm not
Otherwise,
sure
yeah,
if
we do have.
anyone from Prism is here to give an update. We've been having some issues with Prism on DevNet 2.
Yeah, for Prism DevNet 2, there were some bugs with the 7549 EIP that we implemented. We just merged in some fixes for the sync committee related items, and hopefully that'll improve things. Other than that, we'll just keep debugging on Electra. This is merged into latest develop.
Okay, thanks. So there was also a point on the agenda, we kind of touched on it, around EOF readiness. I think we've kind of said DevNet 4 is like a rough target. Anything we should discuss now on the call? I'm not sure how implementation is going, anything like that.
So we have,
Yeah, Ben?
we've run.
Oh. No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ben. So we have some.
Go.
We wrote some EOF container fuzzers, and we have there's a couple of outstanding bugs on a couple of the clients, and as the clients are implementing the old big EOF fuzzing interfaces, we're doing runs through those. So we got fuzzing written there. We're always writing more tests. There's always more tests to be written, and the next step is going to be getting the execution fuzzing updated. So ideally, with all the testing that's going on, DevNet 4 is going to be fairly uneventful because we'll have tested so much of it. Talk about this on the EOF call, but I would like the other clients to make sure that they can run the creation transaction, and that's the real on-ramp for EOF. So that's the real change that would happen when we go into a test into a DevNet from a local environment would just be the actual live creation transaction that's gonna seed the EOF into the system, seed some of those first contracts. But yeah, it looks fairly good. Like I said, I was planning on targeting DevNet 4, not DevNet 3. So that's we could do DevNet 3 as possible, but if people are happy moving DevNet 3 out 2 weeks for 7702, I'm totally fine with that decision.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Ben?
Yeah, none of mine's all up to date for EOF. The only thing we have at the moment is the tests 108 don't have fixtures, so it's possible we might fail some tests. So we can't run this.
Okay, would it be helpful to get test for that case?
Oh yeah, it's just the fixtures for the latest tests need to be included in the artifact.
Gotcha. Is that part of the spec release, or do we do that differently?
I think it's different. It's just the test suite really. So we can't test the latest updates to it.
Gotcha. Okay. Right. So yeah, just to echo what's here in the chat, Perry says maybe DevNet 4 say 4 weeks from now. Maybe that's a little tight, but yeah, I think we can focus on DevNet 3 and aim for DevNet 4 on roughly that timeline, and probably on the next call have a better sense of what makes sense. Okay. Marius, was there any other point on the BLS benchmarking that we needed to bring up?
Only that it would be really nice if other clients could also run some benchmarks and see if they can hit the same numbers that we proposed. I will do some more benchmarks and propose new numbers for what we think the G1 MSM should be.
We plan to do so with our solution that you have seen, and but I'm not sure if we should target EC recover, but it is another discussion.
Okay, there's some chat here. Yeah, I think people are going to take a look, it sounds like. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Marius. So cool. Anything else on this core Pector set that we should discuss now? Otherwise, we have some other things to discuss. That, yeah, seem like they fall a bit out of the DevNet cycle right now. Okay, cool. So the next we have POTUS wanted to bring up EIP 7732. I think POTUS is on the call, although I don't see him. Maybe he's not here.
I am, but I'm not really sure if people can listen to me.
Okay.
Am I muted?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I just managed to log in thanks to Preston that pointed to this browser version. All right, so I don't want to take much time from you guys. I think most or all of the CL team already know about what EPBS is. I just wanted to pitch like in 3-4 minutes what the EIP is, as is part of the formal procedure to try to advance an EIP. All right, so the things that I don't have a slide nor anything like this, so it's just going to be just a quick pitch. The things that I suspect EL devs would like the most is that you don't need to do anything. The EIP does not include any changes on the EL side. It's purely a consensus change. It doesn't even include changes on the engine API. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the ELs, if you guys want to, you might want to implement some changes on the builder API if you want to support being a builder. Otherwise, you don't need to change anything. So that's a good thing. Now, more into the actual changes. The most dramatic improvement that this EIP does has nothing to do with its original purpose, and it's the fact that we can get delayed execution validation without any changes on the EL. So that's something that is nice. You don't need to change the EL consensus algorithm, but only changing the CL consensus side, you get for free that attesters, that validators, do not need to have 2 seconds to validate a block. They now have around 9 to 10 seconds to validate a block. So this is because the attesters only attest to the previous execution block and the current consensus block. So I suspect that this is the most wanted change for most of the community. The way we achieve this is by the mechanics of how the auction runs. So PBS ultimately was about the rights to construct a block, to put transactions in a block, and some builder that wants to buy those rights and prepare the block. So the way this is going to work is that the proposer will gather bids by either contacting directly the builders or by gathering them from the P2P layer or by gathering it from its own EL, and will send a block, a consensus block with a commitment to a bid from a builder. The consensus layer is going to take care of payments. So the builder will have to be staked and have to have at least money so that they can pay for that bid. And that money is deducted immediately as soon as you process the consensus block. But the payload is only revealed later. It's only revealed later in the slot. If you're home staker and you want to be your own builder, you can submit your block and immediately submit your payload at the same time. If you're a builder that are widely connected, you're going to see a block and immediately submit your payload, but you have the right to wait a little bit, about 3 seconds, and then submit your payload later when you feel comfortable that the block has been attested. So there's a second round of attestations by a very small committee called the PTC, or Payload Timeliness Committee. And this committee only attests quickly to having seen the payload. So instead of attesting to the validity of the payload during the current slot, this committee only says, I have seen this payload and it has the right hash and it was by the right builder. So please don't reorg it. So that already gives the builders a boost, so that if the builder is honest and reveals the payload on time, the block will not be reorged. And it cannot be unbundled, for example, or unblinded also. So what happens after this is that the next proposer will build on top of this, and attesters will now have to have already verified the execution of that payload if they want to attest on the child of that, on the descendant of that block. So this is the way that you get delayed execution for free, because of, as a corollary of the way that we have the mechanism. What other changes I might mention? These changes are compatible with all the ways that we know now how to implement inclusion lists. There are some trade-offs. For example, what I just told you, that you get like 9 seconds, that number might become smaller. Or for the next proposer, you have like 6 seconds. That number might become smaller if we include inclusion lists. Inclusion lists necessarily have changes on the EL side, and that's why we didn't include it on the EIP. But this CIP is fully compatible with those modular small trade-offs on timing. There are also compatibilities with other designs for auctions. We can do immediately now with the same EIP with small changes. We could do slot auctions. That means the builder does not commit to a particular payload hash. I urge you to go and look in the meeting calls or in the RNG to see what is the discussion about advantages and disadvantages. I'll put some links, if people haven't put them already in the chat. I'll put some links to a Notion document that Barnabé started with the blockers and the discussions on design decisions that we could still have. As far as I know, so Prism is very advanced on the implementation of this, and we hope to have it completely working by DevCon this year. Teku has started, Lodestar has started implementing this. And Nimbus has started implementing this. As far as I know, I think only Grandin and Lighthouse are the ones that are not working on having an implementation for this. But I'm very hopeful that we will have a proof of concept very soon. Okay, and that's it. If you guys want to join us in the discussions, you're more than welcome.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, this is in the culmination of many years of research at this point. So yeah, super exciting to see the EIP and have things move along. So yeah, if you have any information like slides or things you could share in the chat, that'd be helpful. And otherwise, yeah, I guess the signal for everyone here is start to get it on your radar. Marius has a question, what are the downsides? I think so, POTUS.
Yeah, so let me think about this. So if those questions were for me, slides, I do have slides, Marius. I'll just post a link in a bit. As to downsides of this, I actually don't see any. There are some minor things. For example, if we go with block auctions, as it is now, the EIP, vanilla EIP as it is now, the downside is that if you submit a transaction after the payload was the block was already signed and left, and the payload is revealed, so that's a time that can take like 3 seconds, then your transaction cannot get in that payload. So once you submit a transaction in the global mempool, your transaction can only be included in the next block if you are within those few seconds. So this may delay the confirmation of a transaction on chain for a few seconds. Another downside of this, I think from the point of view of the builder, is a problem that they need to have money on the CL. I've been told by the main builders that this is not an issue at all. But I can see why builders might not want to stake V validators. So that's another minor downside. What other downside do I know? Complexity is, I think it's, as any change,
I don't know if that was just
an
me.
issue. As any change, complexity is an issue, but this complexity gives us for free this scaling factor, which is the fact that we don't need to validate the execution, which I think is worth it in itself, even without the discussions about the PBS itself.
So, quick question: like if you need to stake a max bits, then like can you at max bid 32 ETH, or what's the? Can you have like?
No, you can stake. You need to stake the minimum amount of via validator, which currently is 16 ETH. But anyways, you're gonna have to put in at least 32 so that you're active. So you need to be an active validator, but you can bid for whatever your balance is. So that means if you have any balance, which is infinite now on the Beacon chain, you can bid up to that balance. And with MaxiB, you're going to be getting returns on your balance for up to 2048 ETH. Gajinder has a question about diversifying the builder set. I think this is quite an interesting question. So, for example, if you are an application now and you have transactions, and you want to internalize that MEV from those transactions, what do you do? So that I think is a good client for this diagram. And there's plenty of applications like this that gather transactions and have their own sort of like mempool. So what they could do today is deal with a trusted agent. You send those transactions, you sell those transactions for someone else to exploit them. With this, applications can be their own builders, can hold those transactions and submit bids on the P2P layer, because anyways, eventually they're going to win a block if they have enough MEV for them to be exploited, actually. And they don't need latency. If they want latency, they can open an endpoint and advertise themselves as builders. But without having any infrastructure, they can enter the game as builders trustlessly without having to deal with relays or anything like this. So I do suspect that the builder set will be immediately, we're going to start seeing more bids from like home stakers and organizations like Prismatic itself is going to start sending bids. I do not expect the winning bids to change. With today, we have 3 builders that make most of the blocks. They hold most of the transactions because they're private. And I doubt that this is going to change. I think private transactions from Binance are still going to go to the same builder, and that builder most probably is going to continue winning the blocks. So at least it doesn't make it worse by itself.
And one last question, Produce, which I think you are also discussing in the pre-conf channel, is how basically how compatible is ePBS to pre-conf, or will it help, or will it make it difficult?
That's a very tough question. there are many different designs for pre-confirmations. Some of them are obviously incompatible. The question is how do you enforce these pre-confirmations? If you are trying to use, for example, inclusion lists on protocol to do pre-confs, I see strong indication that this is not going to be compatible with VPBS. So if you're trying to have the pre-confirm being the proposer and using inclusion lists for that, most probably this is not going to be compatible with VPBS. If on the other hand, you want to enforce the pre-confirm to be the builder, which is much easier because the builder is much more centralized, then this is immediately compatible with VPBS. So there are different designs for how the pre-confirmations are going to work, and some of them are compatible, some of them are not.
Cool, thanks. If there's nothing else on APBS for the moment, thank you, POTUS. Again, very exciting to see. And next we can move to a request from Julio to discuss this PR. Do you want to give us an overview?
Yes. So can you all hear me, by the way?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, I would like just to propose to remove the total difficulty field from the block schema in the JSON RPC. So the reason for this is because we can now get rid of some pre-merge depth, and also because kind of asking around somewhat extensively, I was not able to find anybody with meaningful use for that specific field, at least regarding Ethereum, except for Etherscan or Otterscan, which just display it. It's kind of just a block field. And additionally, I also thought a little bit about it, but but this field probably will become obsolete with AP for force, because well, you cannot reconstruct the index if you for full nodes, right? Because you miss you probably miss some blocks, so you don't have the difficulty for the entire chain. So the idea is that since it will likely get removed anyway at some point, I just think like, why not do it now? And also, yes, we need to get rid of it internally because we want to do some optimizations around it. But that's kind of another thing. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of the main reasoning. So I think that the clients can, I mean, in my opinion, they can keep it internally if they really want to. But I just would like maybe to standardize not having it in the JSON RPC. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thanks. Anyone have any immediate feedback? Otherwise, take a look at the PR. Sounds like Ethereum.js is removing the TD code.
Generally seems okay to me.
Cool. Okay, thanks. So next then, we have a discussion around ETH 6.9. So Marius, would you like to give us an overview of
that? Sure. Yeah. So we're proposing ETH 69, which will drop some pre-merge fields. For example, we removed the total difficulty in the status message. We're removing the new block hashes and new block messages because we don't have block propagation on the execution layer anymore. And the big thing is we're moving or we're modifying the way we encode receipts by dropping the Bloom filter. The idea is right now, none of the clients are storing the Bloom filter. So every receipt for every transaction for 2.5 billion transactions has this Bloom filter, which is a 256 byte field. And no one, like, it can be regenerated from the logs, Basically, we just take the logs, put it into this Bloom filter, and so no one is actually storing it. So whenever a new node syncs, the server that it syncs from has to, or takes the receipts from database where it doesn't store the Bloom filter, regenerates the Bloom filter, sends the Bloom filter and the rest of the receipt over the wire, and the person syncing from it receives it, recomputes the receipt themselves, the Bloom filter themselves to verify the Bloom filter, and then throws both Bloom filters away to store it into their database without the Bloom filter. All in all, this roughly means that the serving node will generate 530 gigabytes of data that will need to be sent over the network. Fortunately, most of the Bloom filters are kind of empty, so it compresses really well via Snappy. The total amount of bandwidth is roughly 100 gigabytes, but these 500 gigabytes have to be generated on the serving side and then regenerated on the receiving side, and we would just like to get rid of it. There is some something that we're currently discussing internally. We have these type receipts, and the problem there is we are not storing the receipts in the database as type receipts. We're storing them as only the raw receipt. And so either we would need to pull them out of the database at the type and then send it over the network, or we could send it over the network without the type, and then the receiving node, which will get the type anyway from the transaction, would need to add the type from the transaction before verifying the receipt. Yeah, this is currently an open question. Both schemes kind of work, either sending the type or not sending the type. We could ultimately also just decide to remove the type from the receipt, which would be the nicest, but it's very hard to do because it's not backward compatible with old databases. Yeah, so I'm inviting everyone to engage in the discussions whether we want to send the TX type or whether we don't want to send the TX type. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks. I don't know if there's any immediate feedback. Otherwise, yeah, Marius, is there like a PR issue where we can continue the conversation?
Not yet. I'm going to write up our or like the discussions that we are having onto the Magician's thread, which is linked in the EAP.
Okay, great.
But it would be really nice to get rid of this because this is a lot of data, hundreds of gigabytes of data that we are that nodes are sending right now that they don't need to be sending. So a lot of bandwidth that we could save users from.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So yeah, E69, take a look. Next up, we have an item to discuss essentially rebasing pure DOS on Pectra and how that all fits together. Let's see, Tursek raised the point. Let's see if he's on the call.
Yep.
Oh, hey.
All right. So I'll start by saying the primary effect of this with ELs is that it's a testing consideration. So when looking at the next couple of Pectra DevNets, 7702 and EOF are kind of penciled in as the default primary EIPs to test. And so, and PureDOS is another sizable EIP. And so one of the primary questions here is sequencing and how they interact, and therefore the salience to ELs. And so PureDOS in general is, I mean, I'll summarize very briefly, but the details of it are actually not super relevant here. It's an extension of blobs in a way that they can be sampled, and so that unless you're proposing, you don't have to kind of see every piece. You can kind of reconstruct from partial data, saves bandwidth in a lot of cases. All right, so there one can find extensive discussions of why people want it. So, but the question here is, so right now, PureDOS is still based on Deneb. Their specs, their DevNets are based on Deneb, and this has been causing, in at least a couple of clients, some issues because it essentially makes it difficult to run without some kind of with certain client architectures to run compatibly with current. With a Deneb, with a current Deneb and the PureDOS quote unquote Deneb, right? So the proposal here is to rebase that to Electra, which is what it's going to be anyway, right? Like that's when it's released, it'll be Electra. So the question is, do people what concerns people might have here about? So the specific proposal is that we relatively near term rebase PureDOS on Electra, and then but run the DevNets for the PureDOS DevNets without actually using 7702 or EOF for a while, because they've proven kind of unstable in practice. The DevNets tend to have a dying tendency when they're there. And the concern on the PureDOS side is that it hinders PureDOS testing, and we want to kind of avoid that. We want PureDOS testing to continue. So this is the question for people from the EL side. Does this seem like are there concerns people have with this? Does this seem like a reasonable approach?
So I think this, Marius.
It sounds. It kind of sounds good to me. The only thing that I worry about is because we have like the idea behind PureDAS is to have more data on chain, and how are we getting more data on chain? Or is by sending blob transactions, and the blob transactions right now are based on fuzzers, and these fuzzers accidentally hit some of the other EIPs. We could just send blob transact, or we could modify the fuzzers in a way to send blob transactions without fast code, so that they don't hit these edge cases within. Like, I think the only real concerns are EOF and maybe 7702, but because we're not, it's very, very unlikely to trigger EOF stuff. And it's even more unlikely to trigger 7702 stuff because we're not sending 7702 transactions. So I think it would be fine.
Yeah, so the idea would be that PureDAS DevNet would still be independent of the Pectra DevNet, and we would just use an older version of the TX fuzzer, something that is pre-prog. So all the transactions that would show up would be only Deneb-specific transactions.
But the thing is, TX fuzz can produce transactions that are like even the old versions can produce transactions that are now valid, or that are now triggering something. I can modify TXFast to send blob transactions. I actually have some code to send blob transactions that just verify that the blob hashes are correct or something. So that do some small things with the blob hashes. So we verify that, but and we get a bunch of load on the network without triggering EVM execution at all.
Is this configurable? Like, can the fuzzer be told to sort of not do this?
Yes. Well, not right now, but I can implement it in like half an hour.
Okay, right. Because at some level, the idea is to run to avoid. And I see there was discussion in the chat. Exactly, and it's absolutely warranted discussion whether it's 7702, which okay, maybe it's stabilized now, but it was a problem, and if EOF might be a problem in the future, is to essentially to avoid this, to run as Barnabas is kind of describing, kind of a Deneb like version of Electra on the for as much as we can, except for pure DOS itself. So that's it. The fuzzing introduced aspects seem eminently avoidable, ideally.
We can also just stop the faucets. That way nobody can trigger transactions on new devnets. Only us.
Yeah, just to clarify, we probably just do that on pure DOS side. EOF/Spectra regular can continue. So there'd be two DevNet cycles as it is today. It's just a question of merging code bases on it. And since pure DOS isn't necessarily a user focus, like users don't have to interact with pure DOS much, not having funds over there is not a big deal.
Yeah, that sounds like a good path forward. Okay, cool. Let's see. So I think that was it on the agenda. I guess, yeah, while we're here then, I will call out, there's a Pectra interop testing call starting next Monday. I think it's 2 p.m. UTC. Yep, that's right. So yeah, keep that on your calendars. And yeah, if there's anything else, we could move to open discussion. Otherwise, we can wrap up a little bit early today. Right. So Perry's asking about 4.4s. Anyone have any updates there?
Has anyone looked into Portal?
All of us over on the portal side are here and ready to answer questions, support new client implementations, that sort of thing. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
So Nevermind team is building portal integration. I don't have the latest update because I'm not really looking into it at the moment, but I think the update was that they were being able to connect and download blocks and maybe receipts, but I don't know the details. And it was still a lot of work, like to optimize it and maybe refactor, etc. Make for production ready. Maybe it was mostly happy path, but we were able to integrate something.
Nimbus has a portal client, Fluffy, had for a while, and this is definitely on our roadmap. This is how we intend to build out the EL and all that. So.
Okay, so it sounds like progress is underway. And yeah, I mean, I think the main thing here is just to keep it on everyone's radars. I know there's a lot of things going on. But yeah, let's not forget about 4 Force. Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we will close. Okay, sounds good. Then I'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.